y'all are my people, so we get to talk. And girl's like, hey, you're recording, so let's go. Okay, so I am going to talk to you guys a little bit about classroom management today. I am going to tell you from the perspective of both the office and the classroom. So I think everybody in here knows that before I came to Shiloh, I was an assistant principal at a middle school in Joplin for 4 years. And when I came into that building, I was the only administrator over discipline, and I was processing 2,000 referrals a school year. So that meant that there were 2,000 times that a kid got sent to the office, 2,000 times that I assigned a consequence, 2,000 times that I had to call home. And so as the administrator over discipline, it was tasked on me to kind of look at the data and figure out what was going on and where teachers needed support. So everything that I'm sharing with you today is just a manifestation of what people who are way smarter than me poured into me. And then also, as I went back into the classroom last year, things that I used that I found were really helpful. Because as you know, I walked in last year and all the students look and they say, okay, she's new. Let's see what we can get away with. So there was a lot of observation and recalibrating. So as I was observing those behaviors and I was thinking, okay, what do I need to do to change it? I asked myself, if this were a teacher at my old school who approached me and said these things, what would I say to help them? And I kept coming back to this book. It was something that we use in our old district a lot, so it came really naturally to me, but I feel like the contents in it are like really simple and things that we know, just good to reflect on at times, because as a teacher, I need something that's easy, I need something that's quick, and I need something that's gonna work. And so this is kind of what I used. It's called the Fundamental 5, and it says that there are 5 parts to effective instruction. And it says that these 5 parts are like a hand grip, using all 5 fingers. If you're wanting to grip something and hold on to it, it's strongest to use all 5 fingers. If you take one finger off, let's say I want to lift this table and I use my thumb, I'm not going to be as strong as effective as if I had all 5. So that's what it's saying about these components of instruction. I could be really good at 3 of them, but if I'm lacking in 2 or 1, I'm not going to be as effective with student growth as I would be if I were doing all 5 of them well. So the book says the 5 components of effective instruction are framing the lesson, working the power zone, which is proximity to students, frequent small group purposeful talk about the learning, recognizing and reinforcing behaviors, and writing and thinking critically. And for the sake of time, I'm going to divide it into 2 parts. I'm going to skip a little bit. We'll talk about the instructional piece, and then we'll talk about the behavioral piece. So my personal philosophy on like teaching and classroom management is that they both go hand in hand. So for behavior, it is really important to recognize and reinforce that consistently, but we also have to create a classroom environment that is conducive to learning and growth. So that's where the instructional side comes in. So the text says the 3 instructional components to effective education are framing your lesson, which means having clear objectives and clear ways to assess that objective. Frequent small group, purposeful talk about the learning, which means intentionally pausing during teacher-led instruction to give students time to process, and then writing or thinking critically. So having students activate those higher order thinking skills, kind of like what we do in Harkness. Synthesizing what they're learning, comparing it against something else, analyzing it, picking it apart, evaluating it, or creating something new entirely. So over to the, that would be your right-hand side of the slide. I have some practices that teachers shared with me that worked in their classroom. So in these levels, they would say, for example, I would have a lot of teachers who would come up to me and say, I really struggle with kids lining up at the end of class, and it would look like a store on Black Friday, like everybody's lining up ready to get out, waiting for the bell. And so we would sit and talk about what are some ways that we can keep them engaged and still in the lesson so they don't feel like it's time to go, I gotta pack up and go. So that was things like bell work and exit tickets, a really easy way to collect that data piece where we can analyze that data and reteach if needed. Or for me as an English teacher, I know that I can get really long-winded about things in class. Like I could talk about a book all day long and its theme, and I can start to get kids really lost if I'm talking for too long. So I like to personally use something called 10 and 2 chunk and chew, which the book says for every 10 minutes of direct instruction, give them 2 minutes to process. So as I was planning things out last year, I would think, okay, this is a place where I really need to provide them the example. I need to pause after 10 minutes. I can give them 2 minutes to process. And then I can also collect a data piece from them that I can go and look and see if they've really got it and we can move on, or if I need to pause and reteach and scaffold as needed. Because I noticed last year there were some instances where I would notice some off-task behavior and it was instructional. It was, especially in the writing process, I need to sit and model this and kind of break it down a little bit better so they know what to do. Because if they didn't know what to do, they were just avoiding and talking to somebody else. So I recognize, hey, not all of it's just behavioral. Some of it is we're lost and we're trying to figure out what's going on. So that was a good reminder for me. And then on the behavioral side, I could spend a lot of time talking here, but if I were to tell you the biggest takeaways from people that I worked with, the 2 components for the behavioral piece are recognizing and reinforcing expectations and then working the power zone. So for working the power zone, the text states making sure that wherever you are, whatever you have planned for the day, you are placing yourselves in close proximity with students, which we know. But I also know that if I am having a writing day and students are kind of really processing that, I need to position myself in a place where I can help them quickly, or I can recognize and reinforce, because that can be an opportunity for off-task behavior. And then for recognizing and reinforcing, the text states that this is the most important piece of the 5, but also the hardest, because this is where the emotion comes in, right? If we have students, we live in a world of like rage baiting and creating a viral moment. That's what kids seem to prioritize socially, and so we see that as teachers. I had the opportunity to work with a superintendent in my old district as a new teacher, and then also as a new administrator. And he gave me the same 2 pieces of advice each time. Sorry, my voice is getting a little dry. The 2 pieces of advice he gave me were make early deposits with parents and beat the story home. So when he said making deposits, he meant try to reach out to that parent before you need them. So for example, on the first day of school, I'm gonna be observing student behavior, and we're gonna be able to tell, okay, this is gonna be a student that might struggle in my class a little bit, or that I might have to call home on some point. I always try to make that first contact positive in some way. Whether like last year, I observed a kid at chapel helping another kid, and it was a really awesome moment that they didn't know that I saw. And so I wanted to reach out and let that parent know, regardless of whether I would have to call them or not, but say, hey, your kid did something really awesome and I just want you to know about it. And then eventually I did have to call about something else, and I had to ask for their help. And so I like to establish that rapport a little bit early, because it's fun to build relationships and really meaningful, but also it can be helpful. And then with beating the story home, if there unfortunately is an instance where I have to call home, I want them to hear from me first, because the student's always gonna have a different perspective on what happens, whether it's just their perception of it, or if they're trying to spin it to evade a consequence at home. But I always like for them to hear from me. And so sometimes what I would do is I would create a pre-written template, because let's say it's a class where I had an 8th hour plan. So I had to think, okay, how am I gonna beat that story home before 8th hour and they go and see their parents or they have a chance to text them. And so I would pull up a pre-written template and it said something of, I need your help. This is what I'm observing. I would love to call and talk to you. Any pieces of advice you have would be helpful. And so that way, when the student gets home, they've kind of heard from me. And thinking about this from an administrator side, I think it's really helpful too, because if you have it and you document it, and you do have a referral that you submit, the principal is able to see, hey, this is what I did, this is what we talked about, even if you emailed and you can print that off and provide it, the principal is able to reiterate that conversation when they're processing it versus hearing about it for the first time. So when I was looking at discipline data, I would notice that teachers who called home and maybe made those deposits or beat the story home, those kids were less likely to repeat the behavior. Versus if a teacher wrote a referral and didn't make the contact first, it showed in the data that we had that those students were more likely to either repeat the behavior or intensify the behavior. So that was kind of an initiative that I worked on with teachers was, hey, what works with you? How can we contact home but make it something that's time effective for you and also can make those conversations fruitful? So let me see what time I have left. I think I have just a couple minutes left. I'm gonna send this all out digitally, but I created kind of a checklist of each of the fundamental 5 and questions that I used throughout the year to help me mitigate some of the issues that I saw with my students. So for example, when I had a lot of off-task behavior with the writing process, that was instructional. So I thought, okay, I need to scaffold this. We need to take a minute to readdress it, and maybe I need to use more student-friendly language or something like that to help them really get it versus trying to talk to each other and figure out what's going on. So I have questions for each of those, but also I wanted to take a moment to answer any questions you have, or you are all people that either have poured into me and shared effective things, or I have heard your names as people who are awesome in the classroom. So if there's anything that you feel like has really worked, I'd love for you to share it and hear it. So, any questions you have? Or any insightful
I have a question.
strategies? Yeah.
So when you're making that contact call, like say if it was a referral or behavior issue,
Okay.
do you prefer a phone call or an email?
For me personally, do you mean as a
As
what?
a teacher,
Yeah.
if I have to call, if like, one of my students did something that I need to
Yeah.
contact the parent on, would you say a phone call or an email?
I personally like a phone call because I feel like I can communicate my emotion a little bit better. Because I would want to tell a parent, it is not my intent to get your kid in trouble or to send them to the office. I'm just trying to find a way to stop the behavior. That's just me personally. I just felt like I was better able to communicate those emotions that way. But I also know that there are a lot of people who can send the email and communicate that well. So I would think just whatever makes you feel most comfortable. When I didn't have 8th hour plan, so this year I've got 1st hour.
Oh.
So, which is kind of nice because I have 2 kids and I gotta get them, gotta get Little Saints and I gotta get Harper taken care of. But I'm thinking, okay, if I've got an issue 2nd hour or something after lunch, let's say, I'm probably not gonna be able to beat that story home. So what I will probably do is send an email and say, I would love to talk to you about this in person so I can better share the situation, but here's what I'm observing. And is there any advice that you have, or if you wouldn't mind having a conversation with your student, I would be happy to hear their perspective. So I kind of like to prime the pump if I know I'm not gonna have the time versus always wanting to go to a call and then the story isn't beat home and then I'm hearing from a parent or something else. So good question. I want to recognize Shelby because I know that you have some pre-made templates that you've created. Is that right?
All on a template.
What, from a communication perspective, if you are emailing home, what are some things that you like to put in the email?
I love what you just said about asking them for their advice. And that's something Courtney showed me. Just like, I don't want the parent to think like, oh, I want your kid to get in trouble. It's like, no, I want them to stop. Like, are we still recording? Okay, I want their behavior to stop. I have templates for good and bad because I want to send those nice emails home, but I'm busy, and so I have like a template, and then just have like in the moment insert anecdote here. So I just like type a sentence in of like, today Megan pushed in other students' chairs, and that was so helpful. So that way, it's like quick.
I thought you were gonna say she pushed other students.
Yeah.
I was
I
like,
can
oh,
push
that's
other
right.
people. It was so helpful to me.
That's right.
So
So templates are everything.
that's kind of what I like to do is where I say, hey, I need your help. Insert, make it really obvious so you're not sitting in the brackets. Insert this here. So, okay, I'm gonna have to look at yours and see.